Chinese food. In Western society, it can be largely misunderstood.
The very fact that Chinese cuisine has been around for so long, 3,000 years, means those recipes are timeless. And I think Western cuisine hasn't embraced those recipes yet.
Proven by the fact that outside of China, Chinese food is rarely authentic. However, in London, England, there's one man who is re-educating his diners and showcasing this ancient cuisine.
I want to get people to really understand the skill and the history and the sheer amount of artisanal dexterity that is involved in creating this stuff. And if I can get people to appreciate that, I think that will in turn get people to recalibrate how they judge Chinese cuisine. So dim is the touch, and then some is the heart.
Heart?
Yeah.
It's about heart?
Yes.
This is Andrew Wong, London's undisputed king of dim sum.
Dim sum isn't purely about dumplings. It's about an obsession. It's about years and years of experience and skill and dexterity in creating single mouthfuls of food that transpire through time. Every time I see dumpling, I see work. I see our dim sum aunties, working for 20 years to perfect these things.
Excuse my ignorance, but what are dim sum aunties?
They're basically lovely ladies, which we call aunties out of respect because they're slightly older, and they very much specialise in making dim sum. And nothing annoys auntie more than someone who tries to help her, and then they start to leak when they cook them. She gets really angry at them, myself included.
You get told off?
Yeah, I get told off all the time.
Andrew Wong is a 2 Michelin star chef and a dim sum historian.
Back in the mid-1800s, when trade between Guangzhou and the rest of the world was really hitting its peak, there were these traders who were basically connecting Western traders with Chinese silk merchants, gold merchants, silver merchants. And they basically got to Guangzhou and they said, we've got these really super wealthy people from the West and we want to give them a really good time so that we can continue to do great business with them. And so all the chefs came to Guangdong and they started to compete with one another, making things more and more technical, using more and more extravagant ingredients, making these dishes more and more delicious. And the end result of that really was dim sum, which then traveled across the world and became what we understand it to be today. Now, I think over the past maybe 50 or 60 years, you can see quite a similar menu across a lot of dim sum restaurants. But I think the sentiment that may have been lost is this idea that it's about celebrating this art of the best chefs from around China in using the best ingredients and the most intricate technique that are reflective of China as a whole to an international audience. I think that, to me, is what dim sum is.
Although it was the family business, for Andrew, becoming a chef was off the menu.
My parents worked very hard to try to ensure that maybe I didn't have to go into this industry. And they wanted me to get jobs which second generation Chinese really revered, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become an accountant. I remember I found a grade card, a blank one, and I started filling them out myself. So I gave myself straight A's for like a whole year. And my dad was like, well done, well done. I got into my head that I really wanted to go to Oxford. Then I got in. None of my goals were ever about graduating from Oxford, funnily enough, which is probably why I got thrown out of Oxford.
After dropping out of university, Andrew sought a different type of education.
I wanted to learn more about Chinese food, so I went to China. I got to talk to people, and I got to talk to chefs, and I got to ask them questions about what do they think is important about cuisine? What are the dishes that they remember? Why do they like certain dishes on their menu? And I think that has always been the way that I've navigated food.
After returning from his motherland, Andrew was inspired and wanted a restaurant of his own. Destiny would intervene for Andrew and his wife Natalie when his parents' old restaurant came up for sale.
It's one of those moments in life where you really look and you go, we could either roll the dice and just see what happens, or we can just go do something else. And in a weird kind of way, if it wasn't going to be on this site, I'm not sure if Natalie and I would have even opened a restaurant. Natalie probably wishes that we did something else. But it's been a fantastic journey, and it's kind of unfolded in a way that I could have never imagined.
A decade on, and the A.Wong restaurant is world-renowned.
What we're trying to do is that we're trying to celebrate and absorb you in Chinese culture, Chinese technique, Chinese history within a dining experience. We make a big deal about trying to look at Chinese cuisine more as a collection of cuisines and show its diversity. And we hope that when you leave the restaurant, you go, I never knew that about China.
Of course, it's not just the history lessons and anecdotes, which have won A.Wong 2 Michelin stars.
The first dish we're making is a hagao, which is a prawn dumpling. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a mixture of the tapioca, wheat and potato starch, and we're just going to beat it together with some hot water. So you've got your dough, you're just going to warm it up with the heat from your hand, residual heat from the hand, roll it into a sausage, take off about 4 grams, put it into like 2 centimeter sections, and then you're going to smear it open with a knife. Afterwards you've got your circle, and we're going to wrap. Put your filling in. The filling is prawns basically, with a little bit of potato starch. We're going to try to pleat a 13-pleat dumpling. Again, we trim it because there's an understanding that you don't want to have any excess dough on a dumpling. So put them in a basket, and it's 4 minutes. This is the dumpling as it comes out. So normally we put 2 dots. This is just a sweet chili jam, and then this is just rice vinegar. And the idea is that you eat it and you get all the flavors in one go. There's very little room for improv when it comes to dim sum. I think some chefs, they misunderstand sometimes. They think that dim sum is some kind of like bing bang bosh, whap bam wallop. You just whack it all into a bowl and wrap it up and that's it. It's a complete antithesis of that. It's really about exactness. And not just about exactness, it's about dexterity that can only be achieved through repetition. They say that in order to get a movement to become muscle memory, it takes about 100,000 repetitions. The easiest part is cooking, right? The cooking part is a 3.5, 4 minute process. So I think that sometimes a lot of people, they look at the cooking process and go, 3.5 minutes. They didn't see the 2.5 days before that.
But there's one dish in particular which is a must-have when you visit A.Wong.
This dish really, when I first tried it, I knew that it was going to have something that kind of resonated with our guests in London because of the kind of bond that people have in the UK with custard in general. As a British-born Chinese, it really exemplifies the navigation between Britishness and Chineseness through the lens of gastronomy. And this dish has probably become the one dim sum item that everyone thinks of when they come to our restaurant. But I never imagined that it would become so popular.
And one ingredient that Andrew always uses? Storytelling.
So much of Chinese cuisine is based in narrative. The great example I give you is a dish called The Buddha Jumps Over the Wall, which is basically a load of the very, very best and most expensive dried seafood in China, put into like a broth. Why is it called The Buddha Jumps Over the Wall? The story behind this dish is that someone was cooking this dish from outside of the monastery, and the aromas that came off this dish were so incredible that the vegetarian Buddha had to jump over the wall and break his code of vegetarianism to try this dish. So, these are the stories which I find so interesting, and I feel that, if I can share those with a guest, I hope that they will share my interest in and my love of those stories.
And whilst Andrew is passionate about the stories of the past, he's also excited about the future of Chinese gastronomy.
I think that Chinese food is becoming the next global cuisine that chefs from around the world are beginning to look to. And the very fact that Chinese cuisine has been around for so long, 3,000 years, means that we made more mistakes than any other cuisine, which is why a lot of the techniques that stood the test of time, they're pretty foolproof, because they've been an evolution of so many mistakes and iterations over 3,000 years. Those recipes are timeless, and I think Western cuisine hasn't embraced those recipes yet.